Okay, so here we are on number 9, and I'm subtracting some parentheses. So this is going to distribute. So we'll get 9 minus 6i minus 3 plus 5i when that negative distributes. And then the 9 and the minus 3, what's that? 6. And minus 6i plus 5i is minus 1i. There's the answer they want. The next one's simple. Just add those up. I'll skip that. Let's come down here to number 11. Minus 6i times 9i. How do you do it? Well, minus 6 times 9 is minus 54, and I times I is I squared. So minus 6i times 9i. 6 times 9 is 54. And I times I is I squared. We get the negative in the front. Now, we don't leave I squared. So we never leave I squared. We leave I, right? We leave I. You know, I is part of our final answer. We leave regular I. That just stays as part of the final answer. But we never leave I squared. Never leave I squared. Instead, replace I squared equal to negative 1. Remember, I don't know if you caught that from last time, I squared is equal to negative 1. Why? Well, because, well, yeah, there's no time to prove it right now. That was on the last video. Check that out. I squared is negative 1. So whenever you see I squared, you replace it with negative 1. And so negative times negative, so there's no more I. It's just negative times negative is positive 54. And that's the answer to number 11, positive 54, which is weird because it's a negative times a positive, and it's negative at first, but the I squared is negative 1, so two negatives end up making positive. All right, so number 12, I'm going to distribute, boom, boom, and 6 times 9, 54i minus 4 times 6, 24i squared. And we never leave I squared. I squared, we stick in its place negative 1. We leave the I, the 54i, that'll just stay 54i. Right? We leave I as I, but I squared, we replace it with negative 1. And so what does that equal? 54i plus 24, isn't it? Negative times negative is positive, and there's our answer. They want you to type it in the form a plus bi, which means they want the real part first and then the I thing after. So they actually want you to go 24 plus 54i in that order. That's what they actually want. So that's how you type it in. When they say a plus bi, they mean the real part first and the I thing at the back. Okay, let's try number 13. I'm going to take this 6 and go to both. What do I get here? 42 plus 6i, and then this 2i go to both, plus 14i plus 2i squared. So now the two in the middle are like terms, 6i and 14i makes 20i. And what do we always do with I squared? We never leave I squared. We always say, oh, well, that's just negative 1. Just make that negative 1. And so what does that become? 42 plus 20i minus 2. And then 42 minus 2 is 40 plus 20i. There we go. Let's try number 14. So this means 4 minus 2i. Let me give it a little more room here. This means 4 minus 2i times 4 minus 2i, because that squared means two of them, right? And so then we distribute. So that's 16 minus 8i. He's done, and then he goes to both. Minus 8i plus 4i squared, right? Minus 2i times minus 2i. Two negatives make positive. Okay, so then how do we simplify that? That's 16 minus 8i is minus 16i. And then plus 4i squared. Remember what we always do with I squared. I squared is negative 1. We never leave I squared. We leave regular I. You know, regular I just stays regular I. But I squared, we always replace with negative 1. So what does that give us then? 16 minus 16I minus 4, and then 16 minus 4. They're just both plain regular numbers now. They can subtract. It's 12 minus 16I. There we go. So number 17, we have, notice we have an I in the denominator. Now, how do we handle an I in a denominator? Well, let me write it over here. I in a denominator is like a root in the denominator. You multiply top and bottom by the conjugate. Remember, which means, what is the conjugate? It's denominator with opposite sign in the middle. So I use exactly the denominator here, but I put the opposite sign in the middle. So I treat it just like I would a root, right? That's what we would do. If that was 4 plus 5 root 2 or something, I would multiply, I would say, oh, I got a root and a plus or minus sign, so that's the conjugate. So that makes sense what we did back here, right? Back, where was it? I don't remember now. Maybe that was that the last section? I'm getting lost. Yeah, I guess it was the last section. So, so an I is in the denominator is like a root in the denominator. What do you do with a root? A root and a plus or minus sign. You multiply by the conjugate, the opposite sign, the denominator with opposite sign in the middle. Okay, so what becomes of that? Well, this 2 distributes. You get 8 minus 10I. On the bottom, boom, boom, that's 16 minus 20I, boom, boom, plus 20I, and plus 5I and minus 5I is minus 25I squared. Okay, so what becomes of that? 8 minus 10I on the top. On the bottom, it's 16 minus 20I and plus 20I cancel, don't they? That's why we do the conjugate with the opposite sign in the middle to get that to happen. Minus 25I squared, but what do we always do with I squared? Negative 1, huh? So what does that give us? 8 minus 10I over 16 plus 25, negative times negative, which is 8 minus 10I over 41. Last step, we can't leave it that way. Why? Because they said A plus BI, so we have to separate it. So they want me to say 8 over 41 minus 10 over 41I. That's how they want me to write the answer. You just put you see how they're both over 41? The 8 and the minus 10I. You just separate them because they want you to type them in separate like that. Okay, so here's another one. We get an I, which is like a root, and a plus or minus sign, so that's like a root. Got to multiply top and bottom by the conjugate. Same as the denominator, opposite sign in the middle. Here we go. FOIL on the top. 9 minus 9I, he's done. And the 5I goes to both. Plus 5I minus 5I squared. On the bottom, FOIL. 1 minus I. Boom, boom. Plus I minus I squared. So, what happens? Can we clean this up? So this will be 9 minus 9I plus 5I is minus 4I. Minus 5I squared is minus 5, times negative 1. Remember that I squared is negative 1. We never leave I squared. We leave I plain I, regular I, but we never leave I squared. They're always negative 1. Down here, going to get 1. These guys cancel. Minus I squared, and again, I squared is negative 1. So what does that give us? 9 minus 4I minus 5 times negative 1 is plus 5. 1 minus a minus 1 is plus 1. And then 9 plus 5 is 14. 14 minus 4I over 2. Divide both those by 2. That'd be 7 minus 2I. Right? Divide 14 divided by 2 and 4 divided by 2. It goes underneath both of them. Divides them both. 7 minus 2I. Number 19. So again, we have an I in the denominator. And we can't leave an I in the denominator. So what are we going to do? We're going to multiply top and bottom. But this time, you only need to multiply the top and the bottom by the I. You don't need the 7 or the minus. Why not? Well, because there's not two things glued together. If there was like 3 minus 7I or something, then I would need to use the whole denominator. They'd be two things glued together like Costco glue, and I would need to use 3 plus 7I, opposite sign, the denominator but opposite sign called the conjugate. I would need to do that if there was glue, if there was a plus or minus, but there's no other thing glued. So all you need is the I part, the imaginary part. That's all you need. That'll work. So distribute here, we get 6I plus 28I squared. On the bottom, I times that is minus 7I squared. So what does that become? We leave I as I, but what do we do with I squared? That's always negative 1, huh? And on the bottom, same thing, minus 7 and then I squared is negative 1. So what do we get? 6I plus 28 times negative 1 is negative 28 over positive 7. And then you have to separate those. So 6/7 I minus 28/7 is 6/7 I minus 4. And they want you to put the real part in the front and the I part in the back. So that would be minus 4 plus 6/7 I, like that. Right? You reorder them. And when you reorder them, you take their signs with them. The negative goes with the 4, and the plus goes with the 6/7. All right, number 20. We're going to have to multiply. We have an I glued to a number that's like a root. Remember, an I is like a root. So when you have a root and a plus or minus sign glued together, you've got to use the conjugate, which means the exact denominator, opposite sign in the middle. So there we go. Boom and boom. Let's carry it out. So this 9 will go to both. That'll be 81 minus 9I. And this guy to both. Minus 72I plus 8I squared, right? Minus times minus is plus. And minus 8 times minus 1 is plus 8I squared over on the bottom. Boom, boom. Be 81 minus 9I, and then boom, boom. Plus 9I minus I squared. Okay. What does that give me? So 81. And then minus 9I minus 72I is minus 81I. Yeah. And then plus 8I squared. I squared is negative 1 over 81. These guys cancel. Minus, and what do you always do with I squared? Again, negative 1. So we get what? 81 minus 81I minus 8 over 81 plus 1. So that is what? 81 minus 8 is 73, yeah. 73, yeah, minus 8, right? And then it's 82 in the bottom, and then you separate them because they want them typed in separate. A plus BI, 73 over 82 minus 81 over 82I. There it is.